Some of the many comments about the ongoing scenario about dwindling oil price and the measures that the minister has announced. Well, yes, we're here to discuss that matter again today on Sunrise Daily. Well, joining us to do that is Mr. Albert Okonjo-Iweala, who is the president and chairman of Council, Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers. Morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, good morning.
Well, some of these measures that she's talked about, I know that there's already an argument out there whether they are austere enough. But looking at our scenario now, this dwindling oil price, and there's been this need and this call a long time before today that we ought to have put in place measures to diversify the economy and gone very far at that, to the extent that we won't be running from pillar to post about this dwindling oil prices. What's your perspective about this announcement that she's made now?
I think it's a wonderful development for the country that the Minister of Finance on a Sunday called a press conference to address issues around the oil price and our plans for next year. I think it presents an opportunity for stakeholders who have an interest in the economy to also support the process of making sure that we make those changes, fundamental changes on how our economy is structured, to make sure that oil becomes one of the major commodities that should drive the economy of Nigeria. I think we have reached a point where we need to look very deeply at how agriculture is structured, the value chain around most of our commodities, how infrastructure is funded, what role government plays, what role the private sector will play in making sure that the right kind of infrastructure is put in place. Because there is a connection between our lack of infrastructure and the state of agriculture, and also issues around employment. So I think the call from the Minister of Finance, we have to respond to that call. It's a very, very positive signal from a planning standpoint as to how government is going to be structured in 2015. While we are looking at 2015, I think we have to start looking at medium to long-term plans of making sure oil becomes more strategic to the country. But while we are looking at oil, we must also start looking at major sectors that also have a strategic impact on how the economy is structured.
Well, as you rightly put it, it's going to be medium to long term for these other plans to materialize and be able to support the economy the way oil is supporting it right now. But in the meantime, 2015 is just here, and we have to present this budget. A lot of people are saying that they still do not think that $73 per barrel, what we've pegged it at now, is safe enough. What's your thinking on that?
I believe from a planning standpoint, $73 is a good figure for planning. But we must not restrict ourselves to focusing on just oil. There are issues around oil and gas that will also address some of the fundamental problems of the economy. Some of us believe that issues around the PLB, for example, issues around the gas master plan. Gas is more strategic to Nigeria than oil from an earnings perspective, but we have not internalized the advantage of our gas resources. So I think stakeholders who have an interest will have to engage with the executive arm of government and National Assembly for us to start addressing those issues that are very strategic to the economy. So PIB, we must do everything to make sure PIB is passed.
So are you saying then, just before we get to these other strategic areas, are you saying then that you do not envisage another drop in the price of oil? Right now they say it's hovering around $78 per barrel. You do see it coming further down, even below $73?
I think the issue of the price, you have to tie that to scenario planning. What she has done is she's given us a scenario around $73. If, for example, the oil price falls below that price, then there might be a need for government to readjust its plan. But based on the price today and the projections into the future, the $73 has been used as a planning point for the budget.
The question will be, seeing that this price differentials are not controlled by Nigeria, why would you want to work with 73 now when there's a likelihood? Some other economists have talked about the fact that there's not going to be, for a long time to come, there might not be a going up quickly, rather there might be more decline. So why won't you go a bit down and then work from there?
Anyway, the media has a major role to play in driving the engagement process. I think it is important that we do not spend so much time talking about price or the relevance of the price that is chosen. Let's start talking about how we can expand the economy. The narratives and the kinds of discussions that we engage in will drive how we respond to the issues arising from
But isn't the price the key thing? Because that's what we're planning on.
If you say the price is the only thing that should drive...
No, not the only thing. It's very key.
No, I think if you listen to the coordinating minister of the economy, she passed a lot of message in her press conference. She talked about non-oil sector. She talked about expanding the base of the Nigerian economy. I think these are the kinds of issues that we should...
Oh yes, definitely. The base of the Nigerian economy is a discussion that we'll definitely get into, but we're just simply examining if, as it is currently, because if I heard her correctly as well, she did say that we remember that we did say that if we get to a certain level, we'll review the measures that we have in place. If the price of oil drops further again, we would bring another set of measures to mitigate the effect of that. The question is, why do we keep needing to, look at the price of oil when we can put a very safe peg, as it were, and, make sure that we are above shoreline and plan from what we have that is safe? Do you think that the $73 is safe enough? That's the question.
I believe it's safe. The amount of work that must have been done by the economic team, led by Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, I believe is something that we should take as a takeoff point. What you can't control, you can't control. What you can control, you control. So where we are, we have to align the Nigerian economy, and government, we must determine the role government will play and the role the private sector will play. Okay. And the private sector has a more impactful role to play in responding to this signal from government. And I think that is the challenge that those of us in the private sector must start taking. The financial system has to be reconfigured to play the role of catalyzing the Nigerian economy arising from challenges around the price of oil. Because if we took these steps 5-10 years ago, it would not have, we would not be having some of the problems we're having now. So to avoid a situation where we are constantly changing the structure that drives the Nigerian economy around oil, we need to expand the base. And
talking about the expanding
the base, what government needs to do is to create the enabling environment so that the private sector can play the more expanded role of mobilizing savings and applying these savings to support government in plugging those gaps in infrastructure and helping to develop agriculture and putting us in a position to engage a lot more of our people.
Now, from her statement, she talked about the fact that the oil sector has basically contributed just about 10 or thereabout % to the GDP. But the other services, the services sector and non-oil sector has contributed more. But the kind of infrastructure we have now, yes, we're talking about opening up the base so that we can move forward. The kind of infrastructure on ground, is there adequate infrastructure to move at the pace we're supposed to? Seeing that oil used to be the nation's major foreign exchange earner, do we have the kind of infrastructure we need so that we move away from that point? Because right now it looks as if the waters are really murky.
So we must start sending the right kind of signal. Countries are driven by plans and perception and hope.
What kind of plans should we be making now?
We should be making long-term plans that will make us give people hope and give the sectors of the economy that should drive employment generation. The financial system has the capacity to fund a lot of these gaps that we are talking about around infrastructure. The financial system has the capacity to help modernize how agriculture is done, so that those who farm will get benefits from farming even before the harvest. If you have an indication of the price at which you are going to sell your products, you are probably going to farm more effectively than a situation where you do not have an idea what your price will be. Now, if we have a value chain for agriculture, working with government, I'm very sure we'll have a bigger impact on the country, and we also have a basket of commodities that will generate the kind of foreign exchange that will make oil not as
seemingly important.
Yes,
okay.
As it is
now.
today.
This agricultural chain we're talking about, we need markets, we need processing plants, but the processing plants will require power. You talked about funding. When I said infrastructure, these are some of the things we're looking at. What are the plans on ground? Do you think they're adequate enough plans to see the issues of the Minister of Agriculture was here. We had him here where he talked about the broad base of the agricultural sector, that it's moving forward rapidly. We now have rice being grown and marketed. We have other farmers. He talks about millions of farmers that are registered and are working. And now there's the CBN's coming up with a kind of funding that will help small-scale industries move forward. But that infrastructure is what we're wondering about.
Okay, you see, for agriculture, we need a commodities exchange. Government must fast-track the privatization of the commodities exchange they have. Luckily for the country, there are 2 private sector groups that are promoting commodities exchange. I gather the applications are already with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Once we have that structure, we will be in a better position to affect that value chain. When you know that you have a clear chain of activities around agriculture, then participation in processing becomes a lot easier. Funding for processing plants, funding for direct agriculture becomes a lot easier when people can participate in very organized markets. And there are a number of countries where that structure has been put in place. You have it in Ethiopia. So we need to fast track the process of making sure our commodities exchange are brought alive.
Well, you talked about, empowering the financial system. That you believe that the financial system can intervene, be a catalyst to economic development. What exactly do you mean by empowering the financial system?
No, I didn't say empowered. I said a reconfigured financial system. Now, the financial system is built on many planks. There's banking, there's insurance, there's pensions, there's mortgage. These planks must be better connected. And for an economy that must grow, savings and pensions they are the biggest planks for mobilizing resources for development. And our insurance industry is very thin today. So the private sector must work with government to boost insurance.
What will you be asking be done in concrete terms?
Our insurable assets today is about 1% of capacity. So we must grow that capacity from 1% to very close up to 50%. Our pension assets were at about 7 million Nigerians covered. If we increase it from 7 million to 40 million Nigerians covered in formal and formal sector, the 4.7 trillion that has already been mobilized, we can push that figure to closer to 30 trillion over the next 3 to 5 years. Now, if people see that trajectory, then mobilizing local and international resources to fund a national railway network becomes easier to accomplish.
And that will be driven by strong government policy to boost that.
What we need really is the enabling environment. The private sector working with government can build a new national railway system.